Welcome back to Partnerships Unraveled, the podcast where we unravel the mysteries about partnerships and channels on a weekly basis. My name's Alex Whitford. I'm the VP of Revenue here at Channext. And this week, I'm very excited to welcome our special guest, Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good, Alex. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. And for the uninitiated, I think it'd be great if you could just walk us through a little bit about who you are and where you've been, and then we can get into some questions.
Absolutely. As I said, my name is I'm Chris Jones. I work for AT&T, and I'm part of our AT&T Partner Solutions organization. And in that organization, this is our indirect go-to-market strategy, and I work with technology services distributors and the trusted advisors that sell through those distributors to sell both AT&T solutions as well as ACC Business Solutions, which is a DBA of AT&T. A unique niche brand that's really focused on and exclusively sold through indirect channels.
Awesome. And when I think of AT&T, I think of this huge direct business specializing in connectivity. I don't really think of channel first off, given how much of a powerful brand they are. It must have been quite an interesting role to both be selling AT&T to the channel, but also I'm assuming selling the channel to AT&T. How was that for you?
Yeah, it's been quite a ride. We've obviously AT&T is a very large, very storied company. We've had historically a very large direct sales force, and we're used to customers coming to us to learn about, procure, and talk about their technology needs. And over the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years, as technology's changed, the buying experience has changed and the customer experience has changed. And a lot of those customers, instead of reaching out to a supplier directly, have started reaching out to indirect partners that are much more non-exclusive and they're more supplier agnostic. And they can talk to customers about the pros and cons of technology, and they can piece together multiple suppliers to meet the customer's need, where in the past it wasn't that way. So about 7 years ago, we put together a business case that said we have to change the way we do business to become more tolerant of the indirect space. And I hate to say tolerant of, but we were, as a direct-centric company, indirect was almost like a nuisance. And there was a lot of cultural change that we had to go through to the way you phrased the question. The first thing we had to do before we could do anything in the marketplace, we actually had to sell why do you want to do this inside of AT&T? Why does AT&T want to change the way we operate? Because as probably most of your listeners know, most companies that decide they want to be indirect, they take all of their direct operational motions, their activities, their support model, and they just say, replace direct seller with indirect partner, and boom, we're good to go. And they don't even contemplate what is it like accessing your systems and tools outside your firewall. What is it like when you're talking to someone who has multiple options? An employee of AT&T can only sell AT&T solutions. Someone that's selling in the indirect space is going to sell they have multiple options. And if one supplier becomes more challenging, they're going to go somewhere else. And so we had to really convince people inside of AT&T that we had to change the way we looked at the business. We had to change the way we looked at partners. We had to change the way we did compensation. We had to change our processes. We had to change what it was like to do business with us. We had to change our contract, right? We had to simplify our contract. Some people back 10 years ago used to tell us, it was easier to negotiate with the government than it was to negotiate with us. And so we had to just make it so that people wanted to do business with us. And in some cases, what we really had to do is we had to explain inside of AT&T to our senior-most executives the amount of opportunity that we were missing out on because we weren't playing in the indirect space. And in those early days, you really had to show people what business was transacting without us, because we're used to being at the center of every customer decision, and we're used to being invited in to every conversation. And so we had to demonstrate how much business we were actually not participating in. So after we succeeded in making that sale, then we had to actually go out to the larger industry and convince them that we were serious about this. And it's not like AT&T. There's a lot of channel companies you hear of. They're new. They're logos that people have never heard of. They don't have history. They come out with some new technology that's cool and everyone wants to participate. There was nothing about AT&T that was new to the industry, to the customers, to technologists. Everyone knew who we were. Everyone knew what we did. And we had a long history. We had a long reputation with the channel. And it wasn't as a channel-friendly place to go. And so what we had to really do was go out to the market and earn their trust. And one of the analogies I use is it's like a financial planner, right? When I think about indirect channel partners, I look at them as a person who is constantly being contacted by a financial planner, and we as suppliers are that financial planner, right? And if someone calls you, Alex, you're not going to just immediately move your nest egg to some financial planner because they cold called you and they had a good pitch. You're going to, if you're even in the marketplace to have a new financial planner, you're going to test them. You're going to give them little bit of money. You're going to see if they're serious. You're going to see if they're trustworthy. You're going to see if their strategies don't change. And that's what I tried to explain inside of the company. That's what we are to the partner community, because the suppliers that partners work with are responsible for their nest egg. They're responsible for their revenue streams. And they're not going to work with a supplier that they don't trust, that they don't understand the strategy. And so it's not something that happens overnight, that you earn the trust of the channel. And you also, one of the things that I learned in a hurry is, as the new person representing a brand, you're guilty of all the sins of your predecessors. And at AT&T, there's a lot of turnover. We change jobs. We go from this job to that job. And so when we show up to a job, we're new. We have energy. We're enthusiastic, and we're going to go off and talk to the partner community that way. The issue is the partners have been running their partner firms for the last 20 years. They remember everything we did wrong. They remember when we changed rules of engagement. They remember if we had a compensation issue. They remember if we did them wrong with a customer. And they have very, very long memories. And they don't care that Chris Jones is the new guy. They remember that their experience with AT&T wasn't positive. And so we had to go out and earn the hearts and minds of the partner community, really one agent at a time, one partner at a time, and try and change their experience with AT&T and demonstrate. First, you have to use words, but then you have to make sure that your actions support the words. And partners will give you a little bit, but then they want to make sure that you can live up to it. And so it's been a journey over the last 6 years of making sure that we walk. It sounds hokey to say, but that you walk the walk and you talk the talk, right? To make sure that everything we're saying we want to do, a company like AT&T is big. And there's a lot of moving parts that you need to come together to create the partner experience. So it's been a wild ride, and it's a big change of mentality and of culture, right? And one of the things I always tell everyone is, as a corporate person, you always think inside out. You think about your company, and you assume everyone thinks about you the same way you think about things. And I would tell you, on my journey, where it really changed for me is when I started thinking outside in. I had to stop thinking as an AT&T person, and I had to start thinking as a partner. How does a partner choose the suppliers they're going to work with? What is the experience like of working with AT&T? What is the experience like of working with a competitor of ours? And then start changing the process, changing the way it feels and the way you operate with a partner, thinking about it from their perspective. And that's as hard as it is to get partners to trust AT&T. It's equally hard to get your internal culture to think about thinking from the outside in. And that's been the real transformation. It's been what keeps me off the street at night, keeps me very focused on what we need to do, because there's a lot of partners we need to deliver the message to, and there's a lot of folks inside of AT&T that we need to continue to deliver that message with.
Chris, I absolutely love that answer. And I think I'm about to make you blush, because Channel Futures named you Channel Influencer of the Year. My view is, when you need to make very systemic change, there's sort of 3 levers that you can pull, and that's process, culture, and talent. In your answer there, and Channel Futures, when they nominated you, spoke about your ability to influence culture within your own business and to the market. What sort of culture do you have to build to create that outside in persuasion perspective for our leaders out there? What should they be doing? How should they be thinking to influence their culture?
I think there's a story I tell lots of people, and it's going to confuse probably some of the listeners at first. But if you haven't heard of it, I encourage everyone to go Google the Savannah Bananas. And the Savannah Bananas are I'll call them a minor league baseball team, but they're not even really a minor league baseball team, but they're in Savannah, Georgia, and they play something called banana ball. And the genesis of it, if I give it long story short, there's a guy, the current owner of the Savannah Bananas. He bought this single A baseball team that was in Savannah. They had a really old stadium. Single A baseball plays in the summer. It's not a really big marketplace. And he was trying to figure out what to do with the business. And he did something really fascinating. He looked at the baseball marketplace and tried to figure out, how do you make the baseball marketplace different? And if you think of, baseball's been around for, I don't know, 80, 90 years. It's a 9-inning game. If you've ever been to an American baseball game, for many of your listeners, I'm sure have, it's boring. It takes a long time. There's a lot of sitting around. There's a lot of watching guys do whatever. And so the owner of the Savannah Bananas decided everything had to change. He created, I think it's a 2-hour time limit. The game has to be over in 2 hours. There's a pitch clock. Like, the pitchers have to pitch so fast. The innings, if you win an inning, the inning ends. Like, he's changed the rules. The other thing that he's done is he's created, it's all about the fans. It's all about the fan experience. And the baseball game is almost a separate experience. And so last summer, I had an opportunity to take my family to a Savannah Bananas game. And I tell this story all the time. It was like part Harlem Globetrotters, part Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus, part rock concert, with like a baseball game as the sideshow. It was noisy, it was loud, it was constant activity. As a fan, you were never given an opportunity to get bored in your seat. It was constant fan focus. And what made our game so unique was there were actually 2 rain delays. And ultimately, the game was rained out. But if you were to ask my kids, what was the best sporting event I've ever taken them to? They would talk about the Savannah Bananas, and the game didn't even happen. And I probably couldn't even tell you, nor could they, who won the game or who lost the game. But the entire experience was so unbelievable. And I'll just give you 2 stories, and then I'll talk about why does this have anything to do with indirect channels and the cultural change that we're trying to drive. But, there was a rain delay. Half of the players went on the field to pull the tarp over the field. The other half of the players went into the stands to engage with the audience, to engage with the fans. And if you think about it, there was the classic situation where fans were getting autographs from the players. But what even caught my attention even more is the players were getting autographs from the fans. And it changed everything, right? And it demonstrated, autographs tend to be about, adoration and stardom and those sort of things. And the players wanted the autographs of the fans. It changes it all on its head. The other thing I would tell you is when the game was ultimately rained out, the owner and all the managers and all the players went into the tunnel. And as we were leaving, they were all there giving the fans high fives and thanking the fans for coming and all those sorts of things, which again is backwards of what you would normally expect. You generally see fans adoring the participants, not the reverse. But as we got out into the parking lot, all of a sudden there was a player that had an umbrella, and he was walking a family to the car, to their car. And then I noticed there were multiple players out there. And I actually took a picture of it, and I said, that's unbelievable that players are doing that. Well, the next day, or it was maybe a week later, I followed them on LinkedIn, and the owner of the Savannah Bananas actually wrote about this. And he talked about when you empower your employees to do what's right by customers, they do amazing things. And he talked about the players that had the umbrellas walking players to the car. That was their own idea. It wasn't something they were asked to do. It was something that they realized that said, and the whole culture of the Savannah Bananas is it's all about the fans. And so as I left and I thought about that, I thought about how does that apply to what we do? How does that apply to what my team does in support of partners? And what we've tried to create is a culture and an environment where we talk about be like the Savannah Bananas, right? Instead of having rules and process and things that you constantly have a reason to say no, constantly have a reason to disappoint the fans, to disappoint the partner. What we tried to create is an environment that says, do what's right for the partner, and create an environment that says, there are some basic rules. You can't go outside of the basic foundational things that are non-negotiable. But beyond that, if you focus on the partner, if you focus on, in the Savannah Banana mentality, the customer who is the fan, no matter what happens, good, bad, things you can't control, all of those things you can overshadow by an experience. The sheer fact that I could go to a baseball game, spend 2 hours there. We got there 2 hours early, so we were there for 4 hours. We watched half a baseball game. It rained out, and it's my kid's single greatest sporting event they've ever experienced, is a testament to that sort of fan first mentality. And I think if we all can take that partner first mentality and say bad things are going to happen. When you work for a big company, process is going to break, things are going to go wrong. But empower people to think about it, to say, I'm going to put the partner first. And if I put the partner first, we are going to succeed. And I tell you, Alex, the moral to that story, and I could be off on my data, so someone's probably going to fact check me as I say this, but the Savannah Bananas play in a stadium in Savannah, Georgia. I think it has 3,000 seats. They can sell 3,000 tickets. Last I heard, there were 500,000 people on a wait list to buy season tickets. They've now gone on a national tour. They played in Houston and they sold out the Houston Astros Stadium. I think there were 45,000 people there. I think 1.5 million people applied to buy tickets. They've become this phenomenon. And what I would encourage everyone is go learn about them because they're fun. But then think about how that mentality can be applied to your business and how you treat your partners. And it kind of turns everything on your head in terms of how you engage with people, the kind of culture you create, and how do you get people to change their thinking about you in a very fast sort of way.
What I love about that story is an old mentor of mine. He once told me all good lessons are really obvious. And what I love about that story is you go, well, yes, because the fans pay the players' salary. So obviously you should really treat the fans as the center, and because they're the ones who pay the player's salary. And what I love is you just go, oh my God, this really clever business owner and the strategy. And they went, no, but the ones that look after you, look after them and make sure that they are extremely well looked after. And then you extrapolate that to exactly your story around how should we treat channel partners. And you go, well, they're our mechanism for us to pay the mortgage. So we should really make sure that we look after them. And in fact, our entire focus, broadly speaking, should be to make them successful, make them happy, and really protect them, because that's how we get our bread. And as long as you have that outside-in philosophy, which I think goes all the way back to the culture you're trying to build at AT&T, we are prioritizing our partners, and we are empowering a culture to prioritize our partners. And in doing so, we will be wildly successful. We will provide such value to them that we will gain such value. And I think, as all good lessons are really obvious, once you frame it in that context, it's obviously how we should be building business.
Yeah, it's funny. My team sort of jokes with me, but the Savannah Bananas are like a part of every conversation I have. They're like, oh, done. They send me like banana splits for Christmas or whatever, right? But I think it is. You made the comment. Sometimes the most impactful lessons are the most obvious, and you find them in the weirdest places. And just we all act like this is rocket science. And I think what's really important is this isn't rocket science. This is very commonsensical. And if you create an environment that someone wants to work with you, wants to work with your company, wants to work with your team, because at the end of the day, a lot of people forget there's big logos and big brands in the channel, but the reality is it's people working with people. And if people trust, if you're trustworthy and you create that environment, people will work with you through challenging times because of that trust and relationship that you've built. And again, my team rolls their eyes every time I bring up the Savannah Bananas, but I talk about them nonstop because I can't think of a better corollary for people to think about as to how to change the way they operate out in the marketplace.
Chris, I'm going to be wildly furious if it turns out you're actually just a major shareholder and this has just been a heavy pitch for the last 5 minutes. But to sort of extrapolate that point, you and your team gave the green light to put AT&T on a platform called Cable Finder, a tool that automates quoting and pricing and saves partners time. Broadly speaking, I think it can be described as you went to the partners, you stopped mandating that, hey, you need to come to a partner portal, and we tried to meet the partner where the partner is. How can you sort of connect the culture of putting partners first and almost the process of putting partners first? How do you sort of blend those two worlds together?
I think the way we got there, if you think about it, I was with one of our distributors and we were talking about it. They work with roughly 400 suppliers. And one of the things they shared with me is every one of those 400 suppliers has 4 to 6 portals that they want a supplier to operate in. And so again, if you put yourself in that outside in mentality, that means they have 1,600 plus portals, which means they have 1,600 plus logins, which means they're not going to have any level of sophistication or competency in anyone's portal because they're going to be portal hopping all day long. God, think about like password control, password login control, and that sort of mess, right? And so what we realized, and then we started to think about if you want to be the partner, if you want to be the supplier that the partner thinks about first, you need to be easy to work with, right? And so there's a tool called Cable Finder, and the cable providers were all in there. And so there are tens of thousands of users on a monthly basis that are quoting connectivity, that are logging into a tool called Cable Finder to get their quotes for cable. And by not being there, it meant that a partner had to then log into an AT&T portal behind our firewall, get through all the logins, go into that process, do a quote, which is, we've simplified it, but it's still really much more for an employee. Our, processes for employees tend not to be as quick and seamless as you might do if you're doing it externally. And it just meant that in a lot of cases, we weren't even being quoted. We weren't even getting to the table of who the partner was putting in front of the customer. And so we started on a journey. It was about 2 years ago that said, you know what? We want to get outside the firewall. We want to get into Cable Finder. We want to be, when someone is there to quote another supplier, we want to make it easy to quote us as well. Doesn't mean we're going to win all the business, but it means that we're going to get an actual seat at the table. And we wanted to reduce the friction for a partner to put AT&T at the table. And there's many other friction points that you have to deal with, but one of the biggest friction points is just getting a quote done. Can you get a quote done, and can you be part of the conversation? And what Cable Finder actually does is Cable Finder, you live outside the firewall. It's all done through APIs, and so it's all very systematic. But they've almost think about most of us in our personal lives. We all go to Amazon. We all have gone to this experience. It's 3 clicks and you can have whatever you need: toilet paper, Scotch tape. You talk to people here in the States that they'll order the craziest things on Amazon because the experience is easy and it'll be here the next day. And so what we had to do, and what Cable Finder's really done, is because they're not any individual supplier, they have that mentality of how do you make it easy? How do they make a supplier easy to a partner? And so what we had to work with them on is how do we take AT&T and fit it into their tool? And they then simplified the experience of working with us. And what I would tell you is the qualify through order handoff process. Things that used to be measured in 30 to 40 minutes inside of Cable Finder, they can do it in 3 to 4 minutes. And so again, it's the whole concept of, if you want to work with indirect channel partners, you have to get that outside in mentality. You have to figure out where are the places they go. People kept saying to me, why do you want to be in Cable Finder? Why not do this tool? It's a better tool. And the question was, I want to go where the partners are. I don't want to try and draw the partners to me. I want to go where the partners are, and then get into the workflow that the partners are used to doing. And if you work yourself into the partner workflow, your opportunities are going to increase. And if you can get your opportunities to increase, then it becomes, it's a game of percentages, and then it gives you an opportunity. But, as what did Michael, I think it was Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky, I can't remember who said it, but they basically said,
Wayne
you miss,
Gretzky.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And, so if we're not there, where the partner is going to get quotes, we're not going to win that bid. And so it was a really big deal to get AT&T built into Cable Finder. And now it's all about driving utilization and those things. So it's kind of like, you get onto Amazon. Just because you're on Amazon doesn't mean you're going to sell, 1 million rolls of toilet paper a month, because you're not selling toilet paper on Amazon, but it gives you an opportunity. And now it's one more of those steps towards what I'm going to call respecting the partner. You have to respect the partner. You have to earn their trust. And rather than say, you will come to me, it's saying, we're going to go to you. We're going to have that different approach that says, if we're going to be successful in this indirect space, it's not all about us. We are reliant on those partners, and you have to really focus on, if you focus on the partners and you make their life easier, you're going to get more opportunities, and that's how you grow.
But Chris, I think not only is the analogy of Amazon so perfect for a couple of reasons, but the first is, there are almost no businesses as customer focused as Amazon, right? They are so focused on experience, ease of buying, removing the friction, all buzzwords that you've landed on, because the whole point, and why I think this is even funnier for the channel as opposed to customers, is because partners will continue to keep buying from you. The scaling factor of a partner is actually more than an individual consumer. And so the partner experience, in fact, becomes even more than the customer experience, because the idea is that if the partner experience is good once, they might continue to use you for 100 new customers. And so that care and attention that you've taken, and the culture that you're trying to wrap around it, is exactly, to me, it seems obvious why you've had such success, because partner experience at the end is what creates the value.
I was in a conversation last week in our headquarters, and one of the things that, we all in business, we talk about LTV, right? And generally when people talk about LTV, they're talking about LTV of a customer. And the conversation we were having is, it's not LTV of the customer is great, but let's talk about LTV of the partner, right? And generally a partner, the first time a partner interacts with you, they're going to come in with a small order. It's a test order. It's a test. It's not a high value customer. They're testing you. They're testing the experience. And if you succeed, they're going to give you another opportunity. They're going to give you another opportunity. They're going to give you another opportunity. And sometimes, because we look at LTV of a customer, you might say, no, that's a bad deal, or we don't want to do that. But you have to think about it. If a partner has 1,000 orders in them, do you want to get one of the 1,000 orders, or do you want to get 500 of the 1,000 orders? And so I think that's an indirect mentality that people need to think about. And that's a challenge for businesses, to think it's LTV of a partner. You don't generally think of, like, what's the LTV of my direct seller, right? You look at your direct seller, they're like a cost. They're a fixed cost. They're built into my COGS. They're built into my SG&A, right? But in a partner, if you think about the LTV of your partner, just like you think of the LTV of a customer, you're going to do things differently, because you realize there's so much more opportunity, and you have to think about it differently. And that's where you have to think about, what are the tools? How do you simplify yourself? And I was on a panel earlier, I think it was this week. I was on a panel earlier this week, and I just told everyone, I said, you need to take yourself out of your company seat and go try and transact whatever it is you sell as a partner. And then, would you do it? Right? And I used a silly analogy, but dry cleaners, for those people that still get their clothes dry cleaned. If you went to a dry cleaner that had really short hours, they were open from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and everything had a 7-day turnaround, and they didn't accept credit cards and they only took cash, you would say, this is too difficult. I'm going to go find another dry cleaner. And I think the things that a lot of us have to remember in the technology space is, as much as we're passionate about our technology, none of us have the exclusive solution that can't be purchased somewhere else. And we all have to have that sort of dry cleaner mentality that says, you can't be crazy, but you have to make sure that you're focused on, are your hours the right hours? Is the process of picking up the clothes, do I come and stand in line for 25 minutes to get my pair of pants? Do I have to go to the bank and get cash before I come and meet you, right? We live in a world now, if you can't take an electronic payment, like, people don't want to interact with you. And I think that's what people need to do, is that's back to that outside in. Go in and transact whatever it is you're selling with you, and think about, would you put up with your own experience? And that's where Cable Finder really opened our eyes to how you can make the buying experience of connectivity wildly different. And once I saw the experience, I wanted to be in it, and I wanted to get AT&T in it. And that's when we went on this journey to figure out how we could do it and how we could simplify the process so that the procurement of connectivity could become a 3 to 4 minute process for a partner. Because that's respectful back to the partner. If a partner makes a sale, do you really want to punish a salesperson with an hour and a half of paperwork when maybe you can do it in 3 or 4 minutes, right? So it's all that cultural transformation. It's all saying, we're so used to building around the customer. In the world of indirect, you have to really build around the partner. And then if you do it right by the partner, that partner is going to bring you more customers, and then it's a win-win for everyone.
I really like your dry cleaner analogy. I was always taught that in the restaurant industry, if you can get a customer to come back 3 times, there's a 90% likelihood they will come back. And so your entire experience focus is in creating an experience and a service so good that they hit that third time mark. And I think the same is true within the partner space, right? You've got to make that first order. Well, they're not going to book Christmas dinner, or they're not going to book their big family coming over, but they might just come for Wednesday date night. And we've got to make that experience good. And the second one, and then the third one. And once you've got that flywheel turning, hey, you've locked them in. And just like the just like the indirect space, the restaurant space, it's not Friday nights, right? It's Tuesday nights that keeps them alive. It's, you've got to get your repeat customers. And I think the same is true within the indirect space. We've got to put so much focus on making that experience so flawless that there is no reason they're not going to come back for a third time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, and we do this in direct, we do this in indirect. You focus on. I like to talk about partners, and when I sort of segment partners, you have dormant partners, you have passive partners, you have active partners, right? We tend to fixate as channel people on your active partners, the people that sell you every single month, multiple times a month, and they're much more tolerant. They understand your processes, they understand your strengths, they understand your weaknesses. They're willing to put up with your flaws because their business is actively connected to you. But the key is really the passive and the dormants. There's so much more business that they're doing that you're not, and that's where you have to earn it. And the conversation we always have is, how can we get a dormant partner to be passive, right? What do you do to take someone and just get them from not doing a deal with you for the last year to do a deal, right? And if you get one deal, now you've got them in that sort of passive world. How do you then encourage them to do, instead of one deal a year, get them to try and do 2 deals a year, get them to do 3 years a deal? And then if you do that the right way, you can work them from passive into the active, where active partners are easier to manage. Passive and dormant partners are much harder to manage. And that's where this whole outside in mentality becomes that much more important, because that's how do you get someone to want to do business with you? How do you get someone to view you as they want you to be their financial planner? And it is, I actually think that your active partners, the partner experience is much less important to them because they're bought in, they're committed, they're gonna deal with your pain and agony. The dormant and the passive ones are the ones that are they're working with others, and you have to earn the opportunity to work with them. And that's there. I think outside in is important with all partners, but outside in really, really matters for the people that aren't doing business with you. If they're driving flow share somewhere else, they're doing it for a reason. And the real question is, how do you understand why? And, one of the things, Alex, I would say early on, 6-7 years ago, we did something really hard. We called the distributors to an advisory session. We called partners to an advisory session. And we did something that's really hard to do. We asked them, why don't you do business with us? And then we stopped and we listened. And we had an edict with our team that was in the meeting that said, you're going to listen with your ears. We all have a tendency to want to listen with our mouths and talk through the feedback. And I said, the message to the team that was there is, it may be painful. They may be saying things that are wrong. They may be saying things that are inaccurate. But the gift they're giving us is they're telling us what it feels like to work with us. And they're giving us a roadmap of what do we need to go off and address. And almost to the Savannah Banana analogy, there were things that were real pain points of working with us that we had no idea. And we would have never seen them if it wasn't for completely and totally changing the dynamic and asking for feedback and then not being defensive and just listening, taking copious notes, and then kind of holding yourself accountable to that feedback so that over the course of the next 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months, you go off and you address it. But, most of us like to think we're right and everyone else needs to bend to our ways. And once they learn how to do business with us, they'll be much smarter and they'll do it our way. And what we really tried to do is say, we're not going to force them to do it our way. We need to force ourselves to do it their way. And when we force ourselves to do it their way, that's when the business started growing. That's when partners started doing things with us. And then what was really amazing is they continued to tell us what to do. And so when we were successful, partners would come to us and say, we can't believe what you've done. And I chuckled and I would say, all we've done is listen to what you've told us to do. You gave us the roadmap. We just went and executed on the roadmap you gave us. So if we've ever done the wrong thing, you gave us the wrong feedback, right? And it's sort of a funny thing, right? To say that, but that's how you make a big impact in a short period of time. And, as I told the Channel Futures people when we were having that conversation, we never set out to make a big impact. We just set out to change the way we were perceived. And we did it in a way, I think, that allowed us to take a lot of feedback in, that we changed a lot. And I think that surprised a lot of people. And I think that, that award, I'll call it, that was like an accidental award. That wasn't something we ever set out to do. It wasn't anything I never thought about. It happened by accident. But it happened by just trying to do what was right. Trying to just use common sense, do what was right, listen to people's input and change it, and be willing to try and say, you know what, the people we're going to change is not the external partner, it's the internal way we do things. And as a result, by accident, we had a huge impact on the industry. I shouldn't say by accident. By accident, we won the award. It was intentional to grow business and do the things, but we didn't mean to be, I certainly never set out to say, I'm going to go be channel influencer of the year. That's a level of arrogance that I just couldn't. But it happened by accident because we were so focused on how do we change the partner experience.
Chris, that was an exceptional answer and certainly I think one of the most enlightening podcasts I've ever recorded. I think the focus on generating great partner experience first and then understanding that value, revenue, and growth comes from that, I think is a really important lesson. We wouldn't be a partnerships podcast without asking for a referral. So we like to ask our guests who they think would be a great next guest. Chris, who did you have in mind?
Absolutely. I'll say one of my industry friends that I've met while I'm on this journey in the indirect space is Craig Schlagbaum, who just recently stepped away from Comcast, but he in the TSD space, he is one of the legends of the TSD space and the channel in the telco space, and he's helped a lot of people become very, very successful. And I think that Craig would be incredible for your audience to hear from and learn about his journey. He's been in indirect his whole career, and I think he'd be really fascinating for your listeners to hear from.
Amazing. Craig, we're coming from you. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Alex. It was great to be here.